The blizzard hit northern Michigan in early January, with the kind of fury that reminded you why people used to fear winter. And I had never been more grateful for Xavier Miller's snow removal service than I was that morning. I stood at my kitchen window in Traverse City, watching the snow pile up against my neighbor's house while my own driveway remained perfectly clear. Xavier had been out at 5 in the morning, just like he promised, clearing my property before most people even woke up. The man was a wizard with a plow truck, and more importantly, he was reliable. In a place where winter could trap you in your house for days, that reliability was worth its weight in gold. My phone buzzed on the counter. An unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Hello. Is this Xavier Ortiz?" A sharp female voice demanded. "Yes, speaking." "This is Deborah Chandler, president of the Pinewood Estates Homeowners Association. We need to discuss your snow removal arrangements immediately." I felt my jaw tighten. I had moved into this neighborhood 6 months ago, specifically choosing a house that was just outside the HOA boundaries. My property line ended exactly where the HOA's jurisdiction began, a fact I had verified 3 times with my real estate attorney before signing the papers. "I'm sorry, Miss Chandler, but I'm not part of your HOA. That's Mrs. Chandler, and I'm well aware of your status. However, your actions are affecting HOA members, and we need to address this situation." "What actions would those be, your private snow removal contractor?" "Several of our members have observed him servicing only your property while the rest of the neighborhood struggles with snow accumulation. It's creating an inequitable situation." I looked out the window again. The houses across the street, all part of the HOA, had driveways buried under at least 18 inches of fresh powder. More was still falling. "I hired someone to clear my property. I don't see how that affects anyone else." "It affects everyone when there's only one reliable contractor in the area, and you've monopolized his services. We're demanding that you share your arrangement with the HOA members." I actually laughed. I couldn't help it. "You want me to give up my snow removal service?" "We want you to be a good neighbor and allow Mr. Miller to service the entire neighborhood, not just your property." "Mrs. Chandler, I pay Xavier a premium rate to prioritize my property. I also booked him back in September, before the season even started. If your HOA members wanted his services, they had all summer and fall to arrange them." "That's unacceptable. The HOA board has voted, and we're requiring you to modify your contract. You can't require me to do anything. I'm not in your HOA." Her voice went cold. "We'll see about that." "This conversation isn't over, Mr. Ortiz." She hung up before I could respond. I stood there, staring at my phone, wondering what kind of person thought they could dictate how someone outside their organization spent their money. But I had heard stories about HOAs. Power-hungry board members who treated their tiny kingdoms like fiefdoms. I had specifically avoided buying in one for exactly this reason. I called Xavier, my snow removal guy. He picked up on the second ring, the sound of his truck engine rumbling in the background. "Hey, Xavier. Quick question. Has anyone from the Pinewood Estates HOA contacted you?" "Yeah, actually. Some woman named Deborah called me yesterday, wanted to know if I could take on the whole neighborhood. I told her I was booked solid for the season." "What did she say?" "Started lecturing me about community responsibility and good business practices. I told her my existing clients come first and hung up." "Why?" "She just called me, demanding I share your services with the HOA members." Xavier snorted. "Share? You pay me double my normal rate for priority service. You're my first stop every time it snows, no matter what. That's the deal we made." "I know. Just wanted to give you a heads up that she might push harder." "Let her push. I run my business, not some HOA busybody." We hung up and I went about my day, thinking that would be the end of it. I had no idea how wrong I was. 2 days later, another storm hit, even bigger than the first. I woke up at 4:30 in the morning to the sound of Xavier's plow truck scraping my driveway. By 5:15, my property was clear, and he was gone. I made coffee and settled in to work from home, my office window providing a perfect view of the chaos developing across the street. The HOA houses were buried. Cars disappeared under white drifts. People emerged around 7, shovel in hand, faces already showing the strain of what would be hours of backbreaking labor. I felt a pang of sympathy, but I squashed it quickly. This wasn't my fault. They had the same opportunity I did to hire someone. At 8:30, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Deborah Chandler standing on my porch, bundled in an expensive-looking winter coat, her face red from either cold or anger. Probably both. "Mr. Ortiz, we need to talk." "I'm working, Mrs. Chandler. This will only take a moment. May I come in?" Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. She entered without wiping her boots, tracking snow onto my hardwood floors. I bit back a comment. "I'll make this simple," she said, not bothering with pleasantries. "The HOA is prepared to compensate you for the termination of your exclusive contract with Xavier Miller. We'll pay you $500. You want to pay me to fire my snow removal guy. We want to pay you to be reasonable. The HOA will then contract with Mr. Miller directly, and your property will be included in his route. Everyone benefits. Except I won't be his priority anymore. You'll still get your driveway cleared. Eventually, after everyone in the HOA, could be hours later, could be the next day. That's the sacrifice we all make for community cohesion." I shook my head. "No, that's the sacrifice you want me to make because your HOA didn't plan ahead." "My answer is no." Her expression hardened. "You're being deliberately obstinate." "I'm being someone who keeps his contracts and doesn't let strangers dictate his business relationships." "I see. Then you leave me no choice." She pulled out her phone, tapped the screen a few times and held it up to show me. It was a post on the neighborhood Facebook group. My house number was clearly visible in the attached photo. The text read, "Xavier Ortiz refuses to share essential services during weather emergency. Hoarding snow removal contractor while neighbors suffer. Shame on this selfish behavior." You're seriously trying to shame me for hiring someone to plow my driveway. I'm informing the community about who values neighborly cooperation and who doesn't. Get out of my house. "Excuse me," I said, "get out. You came here to threaten me with social media harassment. We're done." She smiled, and it wasn't friendly. "You're making a mistake, Mr. Ortiz. This neighborhood takes care of its own. People who don't fit in tend to find life here very difficult." "Is that a threat?" "It's a reality." "Good day." She left, and I immediately checked the Facebook group. Sure enough, her post was already generating comments. Most were from HOA members expressing outrage at my selfishness. A few people tried to point out that I wasn't obligated to share my contractor, but they were quickly shouted down. I documented everything. Screenshots, timestamps, the works. I had a feeling this was going to escalate, and I wanted evidence. The next morning, I woke to find someone had shoveled snow from the HOA properties directly onto the end of my driveway, blocking me in. It wasn't accidental. They had piled it deliberately, creating a wall nearly 4 feet high right across my driveway entrance. I called Xavier. "Can you come back? Someone blocked my driveway." "Are you serious? I just cleared you yesterday." "Dead serious. I'll pay your emergency call rate." He arrived 30 minutes later, took one look at the snow wall and whistled. "That's deliberate." "I know. The HOA, Who else? He cleared it, but I could see the frustration on his face. Xavier, if this is going to be a problem for you, it's not, but you might want to set up a camera. This feels like it's going to get worse before it gets better. He was right. I ordered a security camera system that day and had it installed within 48 hours. 4 cameras covering every angle of my property, with cloud backup and motion alerts sent directly to my phone. Good thing I did. The next snowfall happened 3 days later. Xavier cleared me out at his usual 5 in the morning. By 6:30, I got a motion alert. I pulled up the camera feed on my phone and watched as 3 people, faces covered by scarves and hoods, shoveled snow back onto my driveway. They worked quickly, clearly not wanting to be identified, even though my cameras caught everything. I called the police non-emergency line. An officer showed up around 9, took my statement, watched the footage, and shook his head. This is technically property damage and harassment. Do you know who these people are? I can't identify their faces, but they came from houses in the HOA across the street. The timestamps and angles are all in the footage. I'll file a report. You might want to consider getting a restraining order if this continues. Against who? The entire HOA. He didn't have an answer for that. The Facebook harassment intensified. Someone created a separate page called Pinewood Estates Community Watch that seemed dedicated entirely to posting about me. They tracked when Xavier came to my house. They posted photos of my clear driveway next to snow-covered HOA properties. They called me everything from selfish to psychotic. I didn't engage. Engaging was what they wanted. Instead, I documented every post, every comment, every instance of harassment. I also consulted with a lawyer. They're creating a hostile environment, my attorney said, reviewing the evidence I had compiled. The social media campaign could potentially qualify as harassment or even defamation if they make false claims. The physical blocking of your driveway is definitely illegal. The question is, what do you want to do about it? I want them to leave me alone. Then we send a cease and desist letter to the HOA board, specifically naming Deborah Chandler as the president. We lay out the harassment, the property damage, and make it clear that further action will result in a lawsuit. Do it. The letter went out the next day via certified mail. I thought maybe, finally, this would be the end of it. Deborah Chandler would realize she had gone too far, pull back her people, and we could all move on with our lives. I was wrong again. 2 days after the cease and desist was delivered, I came home from grocery shopping to find my mailbox had been knocked over. Not just knocked over, destroyed. Someone had taken a baseball bat or similar object and beaten it into twisted metal. The post was snapped, the box itself barely recognizable. The cameras caught it. 3 people again, different from the snow-shoveling crew based on their builds and clothing. They approached from the HOA side, smashed my mailbox, and retreated. The whole thing took less than 2 minutes. I called the police again. This time, a different officer responded. Officer Patterson, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes that didn't miss much. "This is your second call about HOA harassment," she said, reviewing notes on her tablet. "Third, if you count the initial report about the Facebook posts. And you've sent a cease and desist." "Yes. They received it 2 days ago. So they escalated. That's not smart on their part." She reviewed my camera footage, making notes. Destruction of a mailbox is a federal offense since it's considered tampering with mail delivery. I'm going to refer this to the postal inspector as well as file a local report. Will anything actually happen? More than you'd think. Postal inspectors don't mess around. In the meantime, I'm going to have a conversation with Mrs. Chandler. I waited to hear the fallout from that conversation. It came in the form of a furious phone call from Deborah herself. How dare you involve law enforcement in a neighborhood dispute? How dare I? You destroyed my mailbox. The HOA didn't do anything. You have no proof those people were HOA members. I have them on camera, coming from and returning to HOA properties. That proves nothing. It proves enough for the postal inspector who's now investigating. Did Officer Patterson mention that destroying mailboxes is a federal crime? Silence on the line. Then, this is ridiculous. All of this over snow removal. All of this because you won't accept that I have the right to hire whoever I want for my property. You're being selfish. I'm being someone who planned ahead and is now being harassed for it. Leave me alone, Mrs. Chandler. This is your last warning before I file a restraining order and a lawsuit. You can't sue the HOA. We have protection under neighborhood governance laws. I'm not in your neighborhood. Your governance laws don't apply to me, and harassment is harassment, regardless of your HOA status. My lawyer is very confident about our case. She hung up. I stood there, phone in hand, wondering how this had spiraled so completely out of control. All because I had hired someone to plow my driveway. The next major snowfall hit a week later. By this point, it was late January, and Traverse City had received record snowfall for the season. The entire region was buried. Xavier showed up at 5 in the morning, just like always, and cleared my property. I watched from my window, coffee in hand, as he worked. Then I watched the show begin across the street. The HOA members emerged around 6:30, shovels in hand. But here's the thing about record snowfall: it's not just deep, it's heavy. Wet, dense, backbreaking snow that fights you with every shovelful. I saw people give up after clearing just a small path to their cars. Others called in sick to work, spending hours trying to make their driveways passable. One man, probably in his 60s, looked like he was going to have a heart attack. I actually grabbed my phone, ready to call an ambulance, but his wife came out and convinced him to stop. They left their car buried and went back inside. I felt bad. Not bad enough to give up Xavier's services, but bad enough that it sat uncomfortably in my chest. These were just people trying to get to work, trying to live their lives. The fact that Deborah Chandler was a nightmare didn't mean everyone in the HOA was. But then, I reminded myself that many of those same people had participated in the Facebook harassment, had liked and shared posts calling me selfish, had possibly been among those who blocked my driveway or destroyed my mailbox. My sympathy had limits. Around 9 in the morning, I saw a commotion across the street. Multiple cars with official-looking seals on the doors. People in professional attire getting out, carrying briefcases and clipboards. They converged on Deborah Chandler's house. My phone rang. It was Officer Patterson. "Mr. Ortiz, this is a courtesy call. The postal inspector is executing a search warrant at Mrs. Chandler's residence this morning. There may be additional activity in your neighborhood. Just wanted you to be aware." What did they find? I can't discuss an ongoing investigation. But let's just say your camera footage was very helpful, and the postal inspector's office was able to trace certain activities back to specific individuals. After we hung up, I watched the scene unfold. Deborah Chandler was outside now, gesticulating wildly, clearly arguing with the officials. Her husband stood behind her, looking miserable. Other HOA members gathered in small clusters, watching and whispering. The officials spent 3 hours at the house. When they left, they took boxes of materials with them. Deborah Chandler's face was ashen. The Facebook harassment stopped immediately after that. The Pinewood Estates Community Watch page disappeared entirely. The main neighborhood group suddenly had posts reminding everyone about respecting private property and being good neighbors. The change was dramatic and immediate. My lawyer called that afternoon. I just received a call from an attorney representing the Pinewood Estates HOA. They want to settle. Settle what? I haven't sued them yet. They want to avoid that. They're offering a formal written apology, payment for all damages including your mailbox, and a binding agreement that the HOA and its members will cease all harassment and contact with you. They'll also pay your legal fees. What's the catch? No catch. They know they're in trouble. The postal inspector's investigation is serious, and there's apparently an internal revolt happening within the HOA. Members are threatening to remove Deborah Chandler from her position. Will she face charges for the mailbox? Possibly. That's up to federal prosecutors. But she's definitely facing consequences. I thought about it. Part of me wanted to push forward, make them really pay for months of harassment, but another part just wanted this over. I wanted to go back to my quiet life, working from home, not worrying about what fresh hell the HOA would dream up next. Accept the settlement. But I want the written apology to be specific about what they did wrong, and I want it posted publicly in the neighborhood group. And the agreement needs to include provisions that if anyone affiliated with the HOA harasses me again, the settlement is void and I can sue for even more. I'll make it happen. The settlement was finalized within a week. The written apology was surprisingly thorough. It acknowledged the harassment campaign, the property damage, the social media attacks, and specifically named several HOA board members who had participated. It was posted in the neighborhood Facebook group and remained pinned at the top for 30 days. Deborah Chandler's response was a separate post, clearly written by a lawyer, offering her personal apology and announcing her resignation as HOA president effective immediately. The comments on that post were brutal. Apparently, a lot of HOA members were furious that her vendetta against me had exposed the HOA to legal liability. But the real satisfaction came with the next snowfall. February brought another blizzard, this one even worse than the January storms. Xavier cleared my property at his usual time, and I settled in to watch the aftermath. Except this time, something different happened. Around 7 in the morning, I saw a caravan of plow trucks roll into the HOA section. Not just one or two, at least 6 trucks, working in coordination. They systematically cleared every driveway in the HOA, working with impressive efficiency. Curious, I called Xavier. "Did you expand your operation?" he laughed. "No, but after all the drama, I put out word to other contractors that Pinewood Estates needed help. A few guys I know had some availability. The HOA contracted with all of them, paying premium rates for priority service. Turns out when they actually tried to book snow removal in the middle of winter, after being complete jerks to the one contractor who could have helped them, they had to pay through the nose to get anyone to take them on. How much are we talking? Let's just say they're paying about 4 times what you pay me, per house. And they had to sign season-long contracts, no cancellations. I couldn't help but smile. The HOA's harassment campaign had cost them dearly in multiple ways. Legal fees, settlement payments, and now wildly inflated snow removal costs that would probably drain their operating budget for the year. A few days after that storm, I received a handwritten note in my newly installed mailbox. It was from the man I had seen struggling to shovel, the one I thought might have a heart attack. "Mr. Ortiz," it read, "I want to personally apologize for my participation in the Facebook group harassment. I was caught up in the group mentality and didn't stop to think about whether what we were doing was right. You had every right to hire your own contractor, and we had no right to demand you share. I'm sorry for the stress we caused you. I hope we can be decent neighbors going forward. Sincerely, Robert Morrison." It was a start. I appreciated the gesture, even if it was probably motivated partly by fear of further legal action. More notes followed over the next week. Not from everyone, but from enough people that I started to believe some genuine reflection had happened. Most were similar to Robert's, acknowledging they got caught up in the mob mentality, apologizing for not standing up against the harassment. One note stood out. It was from Alina Richardson, one of the few people who had defended me in the Facebook group when the harassment first started. "Mr. Ortiz, I never agreed with what Deborah and the others were doing. I tried to speak up, but I was shouted down and eventually threatened with HOA fines for creating discord. I'm glad you stood your ground. What happened to you was wrong, and I hope the neighborhood can move forward with better leadership. If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to ask." That note I kept. It reminded me that not everyone in the HOA had been part of the problem. Some people had tried to do the right thing and been silenced by the same tyrannical behavior that had been directed at me. March came, and with it, signs of spring. The snow began to melt. My contract with Xavier transitioned to lawn care services, and life slowly returned to a peaceful routine. The new HOA president, a mild-mannered retired teacher named George Franklin, sent me a brief, professional letter introducing himself and assuring me that the HOA had no interest in bothering me about anything. He included his contact information, just in case any issues arise, and left it at that. I appreciated the restraint. Then, in mid-March, I got a call from Officer Patterson. "Mr. Ortiz, I wanted to update you on the case. Deborah Chandler and 2 other individuals have been charged with destruction of federal property, your mailbox, and conspiracy to harass. It's not just about your mailbox either. Apparently, the postal inspector's investigation uncovered that they'd been tampering with mail delivery to several other residents they felt weren't community-minded enough. This was a pattern of behavior. Will they go to jail? Hard to say. First-time offenders, white-collar crime, they'll probably get probation and fines. But they'll have federal convictions on their records, and there are civil suits being filed by other residents who were targeted. Deborah Chandler's life is about to get very complicated and very expensive." After we hung up, I sat with that information. Part of me felt vindicated. Deborah had gone after me relentlessly, and now she was facing real consequences. But another part just felt tired. All of this, all the drama and harassment and legal action, because she couldn't accept that someone wouldn't bend to her will. It was a cautionary tale about the kind of person who seeks power in small domains. HOAs attract people who want control over their environment, which isn't inherently bad. But sometimes they attract petty tyrants who see any resistance as a personal affront. Deborah Chandler had been the latter, and she had dragged her entire neighborhood into her vendetta. April brought jury selection for Deborah's trial. I was called as a witness, which meant I got to see the full scope of what the investigation had uncovered. It wasn't just me. The postal inspector had found evidence that Deborah and her allies had been targeting people for years. Anyone who challenged the HOA board, anyone who didn't conform to her vision of the perfect neighborhood, faced harassment campaigns. Mail was delayed or lost. Anonymous complaints were filed with city inspectors, resulting in unwarranted property inspections. Social media was weaponized to ostracize people. In one particularly egregious case, someone's pet adoption application had been sabotaged by false references, all because they had painted their front door a shade of blue Deborah didn't approve of. The trial lasted 3 days. I testified about my experiences, presenting my detailed documentation, camera footage, and the timeline of harassment. Other victims testified as well. The defense tried to paint it all as neighborhood disputes blown out of proportion, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for 4 hours, guilty on all counts. Deborah Chandler stood in court, her face blank with shock as the verdicts were read. Her husband sat in the gallery, head in his hands. Her 2 co-conspirators, both HOA board members, looked equally devastated. Sentencing came a month later. Deborah got 2 years of probation, a $10,000 fine, and 200 hours of community service. Her co-conspirators got similar sentences. More importantly, they were all permanently banned from serving on any HOA board in the state of Michigan. The civil suits resulted in judgments that would haunt them for years. Deborah ended up selling her house in Pinewood Estates to pay the settlements. I heard she moved to Ohio, trying to start over somewhere nobody knew her history. As for me, I settled into my house, finally able to relax. Xavier continued to handle my snow removal and lawn care. The new HOA leadership left me completely alone, as promised. Some of my neighbors even became friendly. Robert Morrison and I started talking regularly, and Alina Richardson invited me to a neighborhood barbecue that summer. The barbecue was interesting. It was the first time I had really interacted with the HOA community as a group since the whole ordeal began. I was nervous, unsure of the reception I would get, but most people were gracious, even apologetic. The narrative had shifted. I was no longer the selfish outsider hoarding essential services. I was the guy who had stood up to a bully and exposed a pattern of corruption. George Franklin, the new HOA president, pulled me aside at one point. "I want to thank you," he said quietly. "What you did, fighting back against Deborah, it opened a lot of eyes. We had no idea how bad things had gotten. People were scared to speak up because they knew she'd make their lives hell. You weren't part of the HOA, so you didn't have that same fear. You could fight back. I just wanted to be left alone. And you should have been. That's the thing about HOAs when they work right. They maintain property values and handle common areas. When they work wrong, they become tools for control freaks to impose their will on everyone else. We're trying to fix that. We've rewritten the bylaws, added accountability measures, created anonymous complaint processes. We're trying to be better. That's good to hear. And just so you know, if you ever wanted to join the HOA, you'd be welcome. We've even talked about redrawing the boundaries to include your property if you were interested. No offense, but I'm good where I am," he laughed. "I figured. Can't say I blame you after what you went through." The summer passed peacefully. Fall came, and with it, the first chill that promised winter's return. In September, I renewed my contract with Xavier for snow removal, just like before. Premium rate priority service, first stop on every route. This time, nobody said a word about it. The first snow of the new season fell in November, a light dusting that barely required plowing. But Xavier came anyway, keeping my driveway clear, maintaining the service I paid for. Across the street, the HOA's fleet of contracted plows cleared their section efficiently. Everyone had what they needed. Everyone had planned ahead. It was peaceful. It was how it should have been from the beginning. I stood at my kitchen window that morning, coffee in hand, watching the snow fall. It was beautiful in a way I could appreciate again, now that it wasn't accompanied by stress and harassment. Just snow, just winter in northern Michigan. Just another season turning. My phone buzzed with a text from Xavier. "All clear. See you next snowfall." I texted back a thanks and went about my day. Work emails to answer, conference calls to join, the normal rhythm of life. No HOA drama, no social media mobs, no destroyed mailboxes. Just normalcy. That evening I saw Alina Richardson shoveling her walkway. Her driveway was clear from the HOA plows, but she was working on the path from her door to the driveway, a task the big trucks couldn't handle. On impulse, I grabbed my snow shovel and walked over. "Need a hand?" She looked up, surprised, then smiled. I wouldn't say no to help. We worked together, clearing her walkway in comfortable silence. When we finished, she invited me in for hot chocolate, and I accepted. Her house was warm and welcoming, filled with photos of grandchildren and the comfortable clutter of a life well lived. "I'm glad things worked out the way they did," she said, handing me a mug. "Not the harassment part, obviously, but the ending. Deborah needed to be stopped, and you were the one who could do it. I just wanted to keep my snow removal guy." It was never really about snow removal, though, was it? It was about power. Control. Deborah couldn't stand that there was someone she couldn't order around, someone outside her little kingdom who didn't have to listen to her. I guess that's true. Most of us just wanted to live our lives, but she made everything a battle. Every board meeting was a fight. Every neighborhood issue became a referendum on loyalty to her vision. People were exhausted. Why didn't anyone stop her before? Eleanor sighed. Fear, mostly. She had dirt on people or could create it. Someone would oppose her, and suddenly they'd be facing HOA fines for violations nobody else got cited for, or their reputation would be destroyed on social media. She was vindictive and patient. Most people decided it was easier just to go along. That's no way to live. No, it's not. But it's easy to judge from the outside. When you're in the middle of it, when your home and your community relationships are on the line, you make compromises you're not proud of. I understood that. The people who had harassed me, at least some of them, had probably been acting out of fear as much as malice. Fear of being Deborah's next target. Fear of going against the group. It didn't excuse their actions, but it provided context. "Well, it's over now," I said. "George seems like he's doing a better job." He is. The HOA is actually functioning the way it's supposed to, handling real issues, not manufactured dramas. It's nice. We talked for another hour about everything and nothing. By the time I left, we had made plans to have dinner the following week. It felt good, building actual friendships in the neighborhood rather than just being the guy who fought the HOA. Winter deepened. More snowstorms came and went. Xavier cleared my property like clockwork, and the HOA's contractors handled their section. The system worked because everyone did their part and stayed in their lane. Novel concept. In January, I got an unexpected call from a journalist at the Traverse City Record-Eagle, the local newspaper. "Mr. Ortiz, I'm writing a piece about HOA governance and accountability. Your case was pretty high profile. Would you be willing to be interviewed?" I hesitated. Part of me just wanted to leave it all in the past. But another part thought that maybe sharing the story could help others dealing with similar situations. "What angle are you taking with the article?" "I want to look at what happens when HOAs overstep their authority and what residents can do to protect themselves." Your case is a good example of someone who stood their ground and prevailed, but also the costs involved: legal fees, stress, the harassment you endured. I want to be balanced about it. "Okay, I'll do it." The interview was thorough. The journalist asked about everything: how the conflict started, the escalation, the legal process, the resolution. She also interviewed George Franklin, some other HOA members, and even reached out to Deborah Chandler, though Deborah declined to comment. The article ran in February, a full-page feature in the Sunday edition. It was fair and well-researched, presenting my story alongside broader context about HOA disputes in Michigan and nationwide. The comments section online was active for weeks, with people sharing their own HOA horror stories and debating the proper role of neighborhood associations. One comment stuck with me. It was from someone in a different state, dealing with their own HOA issues. Reading about Xavier Ortiz's case gave me hope. I've been documenting everything like he did, and I'm ready to fight back. Thank you for showing it's possible to win. That made the whole ordeal feel worthwhile. If my experience could help even one person stand up to HOA tyranny, then maybe all the stress and harassment had a purpose beyond just my personal vindication. Spring came again, marking a full year since the worst of the conflict. The anniversary passed without fanfare, just another day in a peaceful neighborhood. The HOA held their annual meeting and elections. George Franklin was re-elected unanimously. The new board was diverse, including people who had been targeted by the previous administration. Real reform was happening. I received an invitation to attend the annual meeting as a guest, despite not being a member. I decided to go, curious about how things had changed. The meeting was held in the community center, a small building at the heart of the development. About 40 people attended, a good turnout for a neighborhood of 65 houses. George ran the meeting efficiently, covering financial reports, maintenance schedules for common areas, and proposals for minor rule changes. What struck me was the tone. It was collaborative, not dictatorial. When someone raised a concern, it was discussed openly. When votes were taken, dissent was acknowledged and addressed, not crushed. This was what an HOA should look like. During the open forum section, Robert Morrison stood up. I want to address something that isn't on the agenda. Last year, this HOA did some terrible things. We harassed a neighbor, broke the law, and embarrassed ourselves and our community. I participated in that, and I'm not proud of it. I think we owe it to ourselves to make sure it never happens again. There was murmuring agreement around the room. Robert continued, I propose we add a code of conduct to our bylaws. Something that specifically prohibits harassment, requires evidence-based enforcement of rules, and creates protections for members who disagree with board decisions. I know George and the new board have been doing this informally, but I think it needs to be official. George nodded. That's a good suggestion, Robert. We'll have our attorney draft something and present it for a vote at the next meeting. After the meeting ended, several people approached me. Some wanted to apologize again for their participation in the harassment. Others wanted to thank me for exposing the problems with the old board. A few just wanted to introduce themselves properly, building bridges that should have been built when I first moved in. Walking home that night, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel about Pinewood Estates. I felt like I belonged. Not as a member of the HOA, but as a neighbor. As someone who was part of the community in the ways that mattered, showing up, helping when needed, treating people with respect. Summer arrived with its warmth and long days. I hired Xavier for lawn care, and he did his usual excellent work. The HOA properties looked good too, well maintained by their contractors. The neighborhood was genuinely pleasant now, the kind of place where people waved to each other and stopped to chat. Elena and I had become good friends. She introduced me to her book club, which met monthly and was surprisingly fun. Robert and I discovered we both liked fishing, and we hit the local lakes several times that summer. I even helped George with a community garden project, despite not being an HOA member. It was strange in a way. I had fought so hard to maintain my independence from the HOA, and I had won that fight. But in winning, I had somehow become more connected to the community than I might have been otherwise. The conflict had forced everyone to examine what kind of neighborhood they wanted to live in, and the answer turned out to be one where I was welcome even without membership. One evening in July, I was grilling in my backyard when George stopped by. "Got a minute?" he asked. "Sure. Want a burger?" "Don't mind if I do. We sat on my deck, eating and watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. "I wanted to update you on something," George said. "Remember those civil suits against Deborah and the others?" "Yeah. The last one settled this week. It's finally over. All the victims have been compensated, all the legal issues resolved. We can finally close that chapter." "That's good to hear." It cost the HOA a significant amount of money in legal fees and insurance premiums. Our dues went up this year to cover it. But you know what? Nobody complained. Everyone knows it was necessary. Everyone knows we're better off now. Expensive lesson. Very, but worth it. He paused, then added, "I heard Deborah's working as a receptionist in Columbus, lost her house, most of her savings. Her husband divorced her. She's basically starting over from scratch." I thought about that. Part of me felt satisfaction she had tried to destroy me and ended up destroying herself. But another part just felt sad. All of that pain and loss, hers and everyone else's, because she couldn't let go of control. "Play stupid games, win stupid prizes," I said quietly. "Indeed." We finished our burgers in companionable silence. After George left, I stayed outside, watching the stars emerge. My property was peaceful, my driveway would be clear come winter, and my neighbors were genuinely friendly. It had taken a year of hell to get here, but I had ended up exactly where I wanted to be. The following winter was anticlimactic, which was perfect. Xavier cleared my snow, the HOA contractors cleared theirs, and life went on. No drama, no conflict, no federal investigations. Just winter, handled efficiently by people who had planned ahead. On a particularly cold morning in January, I watched Xavier clear my driveway while the HOA crew worked across the street. I thought about that first phone call from Deborah, her demand that I share my contractor, the certainty in her voice that she had the right to dictate my choices. She had been so sure of her power, so confident that she could bend me to her will, that I would cave like apparently everyone else had before me. She had never considered that someone might say no and mean it, might be willing to endure harassment and legal battles rather than submit. In the end, that was what had defeated her. Not my lawyer or the postal inspector or the police. Those were tools, means to an end. What really defeated her was the simple, stubborn refusal to be bullied. The recognition that her power was an illusion, effective only against people who accepted it. I had never accepted it. I had never been part of her HOA, never subject to her rules, never willing to pretend she had authority she didn't have. And when she tried to create that authority through harassment and intimidation, I had documented everything and fought back through proper legal channels. It shouldn't have been necessary. In a sane world, I would have hired my snow removal guy, and that would have been the end of it. But petty tyrants don't operate in a sane world. They operate in a world where power is measured in control over others, where any resistance must be crushed, where community means conformity. I was glad that world had been dismantled, at least in this one neighborhood. The new HOA wasn't perfect, no organization run by humans ever is, but it was functional, reasonable, and respectful of boundaries. That was enough. Xavier finished my driveway and waved as he drove off to his next client. I waved back, then went inside to start my workday. Coffee was brewing, my computer was booting up, and outside my window the world was covered in clean white snow. It was going to be a good day, just like yesterday and the day before, and hopefully all the days to come. Normal, peaceful, boring days. The kind of days that made all the fighting worthwhile. Eleanor called around noon, inviting me to dinner that weekend. Robert texted about a fishing trip in the spring. George sent a neighborhood newsletter that actually contained useful information about upcoming road maintenance and community events. This was community. Not forced participation or mandatory conformity, but voluntary connection between people who chose to be good neighbors. It had taken a crisis to get here, but we had arrived. The neighborhood was better for it, and so was I. That night, I looked over all the documentation I had kept from the conflict. Hundreds of screenshots, camera footage, legal documents, correspondence. It was a complete record of everything that had happened. I had kept it all as insurance in case Deborah or her allies tried anything else. But they hadn't, and they wouldn't. I backed everything up one more time, then filed it away. Not deleted, I wasn't that trusting, but filed away, archived, no longer something I needed to think about daily. The past was the past. The present was peaceful. The future looked bright, and when the next snow came, Xavier would clear my driveway just like always. Because that was the deal we made, and I kept my deals. Simple as that. The end of my story wasn't dramatic. There were no final confrontations or last-minute revelations. Just resolution, followed by the steady rhythm of normal life. But sometimes that's the best ending, not a bang, but a contented sigh. Peace after conflict. Order after chaos. A neighborhood finding its way back to what it should have been all along. I had demanded nothing from the HOA. I had asked only to be left alone to make my own choices about my own property. That such a simple request had sparked such drama said everything about what was wrong with the old regime and everything that was right about standing your ground. The HOA had demanded I share my snow removal guy. I had refused, and in the end I watched them dig out just like I said I would. But more than that, I watched them rebuild. Watch them become something better. Watch them learn that power means responsibility and community means respect. That was worth more than any settlement or legal victory. That was real change, the kind that lasts, and I had been part of making it happen, simply by refusing to back down. Sometimes that's all it takes. Sometimes standing firm is enough. The snow kept falling that winter and every winter after. Xavier kept plowing. The HOA kept their properties clear. Neighbors helped neighbors. Life went on, and I lived happily ever after in my house just outside the HOA boundaries, completely unbothered by anyone's demands about what I should or shouldn't do with my own property. It was exactly what I had wanted from the beginning. Sometimes the best victories are the quiet ones, where you end up exactly where you started, but everyone else has finally accepted you have the right to be there.